Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, part 2 of making an axe. So in our last video, we showed the forging of the head of the axe, and in this video, we're going to show the woodwork making the handle. All right, let's jump right on into it. If you want to start from the beginning of this project and see me forging the axe head, click on the link in the description or the cards, and you can check out the very beginning of this project. Now my intention is to do most of the work by hand. Gotta admit that I forgot what I was doing once and grabbed a power tool, but nothing that you couldn't duplicate easily with a hand tool. I'm using a piece of 5/4 ash. Ash and hickory are the traditional handles for tools in the US, and this was a nice straight grain piece that I found at my wood supplier. I probably could have done this project with 4/4, but better safe than sorry. This is going to be a forest axe, meaning that it's not a full-sized felling axe, but it's bigger than a hatchet. The handle's going to be about 2 feet long. I made a rough, oversized pattern. I'm a knife guy, not an axe guy, so I want to give myself plenty of screw-up room. Like I said, my intention was to do this whole thing with hand tools, but I sort of forgot and cut it out on my bandsaw. The rest of the build is mainly by hand, but you could do this with a fret saw or a coping saw or whatever without much trouble. I'll plane off a little thickness. I'm using Japanese planes which work on the pull stroke. I intended to use a curved sole plane too, but I forgot that I'd loaned it out to a buddy of mine. Getting into these interior curves is impossible with a conventional plane, but not to worry, I just use a curved soled spoke shave. Not really as good as the curved plane that I made for this kind of purpose myself, but it works fine. In fact, for the tight corners, it's even better. The rest of them, not quite as good, but once I've got the handle a little closer to final thickness, I'll go ahead and fit the head of the axe to the haft. This is by far the finickiest and most important part of this whole process. So again, it's good to get it done early in case you screw up. I'll mark the rough shape and then just start pruning away the excess. It's a very slow process. When you're doing this kind of thing where you're fitting something really exactly, you want to sneak up on it carefully and slowly. Try fitting over and over as you go. If you get impatient and try to hog off a bunch of material, you'll overshoot and mess the whole thing up. There are a lot of tricks that you can use for this kind of fitting. You can black the interior of the axe head so it marks the wood and shows you what to remove, or you can look down through the eye and see where light's coming up and then remove the places that are occluding the light. You can bang the head on kind of hard and see where it digs into the wood and then remove those little sections. Anything like that will work as long as you go slowly. The eye is tapered so the haft will naturally be thicker at the bottom, and that makes the whole thing a little bit easier. If you do overshoot, you can always drive the head further down, chop off the waist at the top, and still end up with a great fit. So once it's fitted up nice and tight, it's time to turn back to the handle. I'll thin it some more, then start working the corners down to an oval shape. Once again, I'm using planes and the spoke shaves, but you could use surform tools, rasps, floats, or any number of other tools. And of course, all kinds of power tools would work great too. This part's much easier to do than fitting the head. It can be a little tedious, but it's not too bad. I'm sure there's a much smarter way to hold the axe handle for this work, but I didn't really figure out what that might be. There's probably some kind of specialized fixture, but obviously I'm just kind of monkeying around with it so that I can get at the parts that I need to clean up. Hey guys, let me jump in quickly to send out a big thanks to all my supporters on Patreon. Now, if you're not familiar with Patreon, it's a service that allows you to support guys like me who bring something into your life that you find valuable on YouTube or wherever. Now, personally, I've gotten just a stupefying amount of value from various people that I've watched on YouTube. And I know how hard it is to make these videos and how much time it takes. So it really gives me a feeling of, like being an adult, responsible guy to give back a little in return for the benefits that I've harvested from those guys' videos. So if you want to have the same happy sensation, personal responsibility, here's my Patreon address, or click the cards for more info. Thanks, and now we're back to it. Once the shape's more or less perfected, I'll use a sanding block to smooth everything out. I'm only showing the final 320 grit finishing stage, but you'll want to start closer to 80 grit or so to remove all the faceting left by the planes, spoke shaves, or whatever tools you've used. Next, I'll split the haft so that I can install a wedge that will secure the head to the handle. So here's a little wedge, and I'll just bang that sucker in with a mallet. After letting the glue cure overnight, I'll delicately trim the wedge with a chisel so as not to scratch up the head of the axe. And all that's left to do is put a finish on the handle. I'll give it a couple coats of boiled linseed oil, Smoothing it down a little bit with 4/0 steel wool. And that'll do her. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make Hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make Hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.